Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Yuuei Survival Guide. This will be Part 7, Chapter 4. Over the next couple days, Izuku tries to make good on his promise to Oboro. He tries to trust the teachers. Some, like Present Mike Sensei, make it easier than others. Not to name any names. Aizawa Sensei. It's hard not to trust someone like Present Mike. The man's got such a charismatic personality, and he's always so cheerful and enthusiastic whenever he's teaching. It's only been a couple days, but it really feels like the man knows them, that he has a grip on each of their personalities, who to call on in class and when to do it, who's struggling a bit more than others, how he's able to explain things without making you feel stupid for not understanding right away. He's kind, and he teaches in such an upbeat way that it makes Izuku not hate English class entirely. Izuku's even noticed that the voice hero seems to be keeping a closer eye on him and, by extension, Kacchan as well. There haven't been any other incidents since Izuku had talked to Aizawa-sensei, and Kacchan had mellowed out into an angered silence after he'd been called to stay behind after class by their homeroom teacher. Izuku really wonders what had been said, but he's definitely not going to be asking Kacchan, nor will he risk sticking his nose where it doesn't belong and bothering Sensei. That had happened the day after Sensei had spoken to Izuku in the morning, but the green-haired boy had a sneaking suspicion that Sensei would have done it that very same day had Izuku not stayed back to play catch-up with the man. Maybe Aizawa-sensei just didn't want them crossing paths so soon, or maybe he'd needed to plan out what he'd planned to tell Kacchan. Sensei had gone to the length to brief Izuku on what he'd planned on telling Kacchan, how he planned to go about it without pinning the blame on Izuku for saying anything, though he knows Kacchan is clever enough to put two and two together, given the timing of how this all is falling into place. Izuku's a little nervous of how Kacchan will react when he actually has the chance to. Izuku suspects it won't be long until he finds himself in a one-on-one meeting with Sensei about possible Quirk counseling and guidance counseling for himself as well. He's not looking forward to that. Either way, Izuku's glad it had all seemed to work out. Izuku's noticed both their English teacher and their homeroom teacher keeping a close eye on Izuku and Kacchan, but he hasn't really noticed any of the other teachers doing it. It seems to be something only the two of them are really watching. Present Mike had even gone as far as to arrange any partner activities in the classroom with Izuku and Kacchan in different groups, on either side of the classroom. It was a little odd. Izuku can't help but wonder once again just how close Aizawa-sensei and Present Mike actually are. It's pretty obvious the voice hero has been kept in the loop of Izuku and Kacchan's problems, but none of the other teachers really seem to know. It doesn't make much sense. Izuku doesn't think it's really necessary to inform the entire staff about a problem that really only persists in a specific setting, which would be heroics classes. Honestly, if any teacher was going to be told about it, Izuku had expected it to be All Might let in on the information. He was the other teacher in charge of 1A's fundamental heroics training, so wouldn't it make more sense for All Might to know, rather than Present Mike? The number one hero hadn't brought it up to Izuku. He also didn't really appear to be worried about any rivalry among his successor and another student. Izuku really doesn't think All Might knows, but he doesn't really mind anyways. He hadn't really wanted to bring attention to it in the first place, so it's fine if just Aizawa-sensei and Present Mike know. Well, and maybe even Principal Nezu. The rodent-like creature kinda gives him the impression that he knows far more than he lets on, which would make sense considering his intelligence quirk, high specs. At least, Izuku thinks as much, considering he hasn't actually met the creature yet, just knows from his analysis and observations. He only gets the chance to ask about that lingering thought a couple days later, towards the end of their first week of classes. Izuku holds his phone to his ear, a deceitful attempt at making it look like he's not actually talking to himself in the middle of a busy walkway, keeping his attention forward, despite the ghostly presence at his side. Are Present Mike and Aizawa-sensei friends? The ghost had taken to walking home with Izuku after the ghost had chased him down in the evening, bursting into the boy's apartment without manners. Izuku really doesn't mind the company, actually. He likes having someone around in the evenings until the ghost takes off to follow after Present Mike or Sensei. Izuku thinks the ghost likes routine, and Izuku can't argue that he hadn't taken to the routine pretty easily, too. At his side, the ghost seems to stumble over his own feet, a sputter of unintelligible words of surprised confusion leaving the ghost's mouth as he tries to keep himself upright. What? Are they friends? Izuku repeats, eyes flicking to watch the ghost. Izuku's not even sure the ghost hears him through his own boisterous laughter, the ghost's body bending in half as he loops his arms around his stomach like he's laughing to the point it hurts. He laughs until he's struggling to pull in breaths, bending over to force in wheezed gasps of oxygen. Izuku shoots a sideways glare at the cackling ghost, brows furrowing slightly in concern. Izuku is pretty sure ghosts don't actually need to be able to breathe. He doesn't even have lungs, but it's still common courtesy to slow to a stop beside the ghost, waiting for this little annoying episode to cease. Izuku doesn't know what's so funny about his question. He feels a bit like an idiot stood off to the side of the foot traffic, so he's not in the way. A ghost wheezing for breath at his side. If the ghost were alive, Izuku would have reached over, pat the other on the back, but he'd look even more ridiculous standing there petting air, and of course his hand would just phase right through Oboro. Oboro's even got tears in his eyes, that he wipes away, with the last of his giggles. The longer Izuku waits at the ghost's side for him to stop laughing, the more annoyed Izuku gets. It was a simple question, a yes or no kind of thing, so what's with the theatrics? Finally, Izuku gets tired of standing there, shoulders wilting inwards faintly as he frowns. Are you just gonna laugh at me or answer me? I thought you said you were going to be my cheat sheet. I'm not laughing at you. The ghost insists seriously between breathy laughs, finally appearing to be getting a hold of himself. It's about time. I meant the whole cheat sheet thing for your classes, not for your teachers. Wow. That's actually hilarious. What gave you the idea that they're friends anyways? I mean, they're not friendly with each other, are they? And I don't think Shota likes anyone, you know? They arrive to school together most of the time, Izuku mutters factually, even though he'd only really seen that once. And they seem close. I mean, Present Mike acts like he knows about Kachan and I, even though only All Might and Aizawa-sensei should. None of the other teachers seem to be aware. Plus, you said it yourself, Present Mike-sensei did damage control after Aizawa-sensei's first class. And you hang around the both of them all the time, so they've got to be close, at least a bit, right? Oboro listens intently, a grin curving onto his lips as he nods along. All good points, but have you considered the alternatives? Alternatives? Izuku's head quirks a little, watching the ghost out of the corner of his eyes. Like what? Izuku starts to walk, slowly as the ghost hurries to fall into step with him again. He's calmed down now, no longer laughing, though his face does have a bit more color after the fit. Sure, Oboro shrugs, toothy grin never wavering. Like, for example, the fact that carpool is a thing. It's cheaper, and it saves the environment. They're both going to the same place, you know. Or the other alternative, that your teachers are just big old gossips about their students. It's hardly a secret if he's noticed it too. Honestly, you'd be surprised how much the teachers actually talk about their students. And I'm pretty sure any teacher after Shota would know to do some damage control. Zashi's just the poor unlucky soul tasked with it, simply by how the day pans out. Probably for the best, though. He is pretty good at cleaning up after Shota's gruffness. And lastly, I appreciate you lumping me into the same category as them, but I'm just along for the ride, you know? Izuku pouts, shifting his hold on his face when it starts to slip a bit. Well, sure, but that still doesn't answer my question. They can do all that and still be friends, so are they close? Sensei looks at present Mike like he's always annoyed, but it still feels different. And Mike seems very comfortable with Aizawa-sensei, more so than most of the teachers. Who knows? The ghost lifts his hands in an I don't know gesture, offering Izuku one of his squinty-eyed grins that is honestly very telling that the ghost does, in fact, know. Oboro sounds amused, like he's jerking Izuku along for the hell of it. Though, I suppose you could say they're close. Yeah. The jocular way the ghost brushes him off and the bordering on devious smile that curls onto his lips has Izuku rethinking even asking the question in the first place. For some reason, the ghost has decided to draw the line at this, and it's not like Izuku can do anything about that. Oboro is clearly good at keeping secrets and skirting around what he wants to. The perks of being a ghost, Izuku supposes. Who knows? Maybe Aizawa-sensei and present Mike have some dark history, or big secret or something. Izuku blows out a quiet breath, angling his head to shoot the ghost a half-heartedly annoyed frown before the expression lifts to a small half-smile. It's more defeat than anything else, but he doesn't take it to heart. It's not like he would have even had a chance at answers if Oboro didn't hang around his teachers in the first place. This had just been an attempt. A failed attempt, but an attempt no less. Oboro doesn't try to add anything else, and Izuku doesn't bother pushing. He'd clearly gotten all he was going to be getting out of the ghost. The boy bites at the inside of his cheek, accepting his defeat with a click of his tongue in hopes of conveying that lingering edge of annoyance when he catches sight of the idiot grinning like an idiot at his side. Oboro looks so pleased with himself, Izuku chooses to ignore it. The green-haired boy huffs a sigh, picking up his pace for a couple quick steps, just enough to leave Oboro behind for a second or two, but slow enough that the ghost can match his speed easily if he tries. All Oboro does is chuckle, eyes locked on Izuku and filled with nothing but mirth. The green-haired boy rolls his eyes, but he knows there's a grin curling onto his lips. You know, you're kinda awful. I'm fun, the ghost corrects cheerfully, skipping to join Izuku at his side. He sways closer, and for a moment, Izuku thinks Oboro might throw an arm around his shoulders and tug him into his side. It feels right. He hasn't known the other long, but it feels like something he'd do. Oboro's got a cheerful personality, one that Izuku adores. He wishes he'd known this guy when he was alive. Izuku thinks he would have been a great friend to have, without all the drawbacks of befriending a ghost. The ghost can't, but Izuku can almost feel his intentions, even as he blows out a breath and pulls away with a sad, lopsided smile. In truth, he comes out of that conversation just as confused as he'd gone into it. Oboro speaking in riddles like that was annoying, but he supposes the ghost likes having some sort of air of mystery surrounding him or something. Or maybe he just likes being an evasive dork sometimes. He really doesn't know a lot about the ghost. Oboro knows far more about Izuku than Izuku knows about him, but Izuku's kind of in a position where he doesn't want to push the ghost. Doesn't want to risk pushing the ghost away by being too prying. He's hopeful that at some point the ghost will want to tell him stuff, will feel comfortable doing so, and not just because Izuku asked, or feels like he has to. Either way, Izuku doesn't get a real answer from the ghost, and he doesn't push for one either. Izuku doesn't think he'll end up getting anywhere anyways, because for some reason, probably the devious smile on the ghost's face, he's fairly sure his friend is just leading him along on the topic at this point, so he's still left to wonder. He just assumes present Mike and Aizawa-sensei are indeed friends, or maybe they're teaching buddies or close acquaintances, or something along those lines. They're polar opposites. Izuku's not even sure how the two of them would have become close, how a relationship would have sparked between the two of them, but he's sure there's no way they're just colleagues. He ends up thinking about that for the rest of the evening, but by the following morning, his thoughts have shifted to other things, like his classwork, classes, and that innocent request from his ghost friend to talk to his teacher, which honestly feels like a weight shackled to his heart. He's trying to trust. Honestly, he is, but it's not that simple. Oboro doesn't understand, as good as his intentions are. It's clear the ghost wasn't quirkless when he was alive. Izuku can just tell by how he presents himself, and that's where the issue really lies. It might seem like an easy, simple request to make, but it's harder for someone like Izuku. Still, he's trying to give them a chance. Some of his new teachers seem like they could be allies, maybe, but others fill Izuku with a sense of dread when he speaks to them. And it's rather unfortunate that one of those teachers just so happens to be the one Oboro has decided is the person Izuku needs to place all his trust into. The thing is, Izuku wants to be able to trust his teacher. He wants to be able to rely on Aizawa-sensei. The man seems trustworthy, and for his part, he's been a good teacher thus far, caring and attentive, in his own standoffish way. And yet, on the other hand, Izuku had always been a firm believer of first impressions, and the truth was that Izuku's first memorable impression of the man was him telling him that he was as good as useless, even with the new quirk he'd worked his ass off to get. His first impression of the man was of his new teacher threatening to expel him right off the bat. Sure, he'd come to Izuku's defense when it came to Kachan, and he'd been putting in the effort to keep the school a safe learning environment for Izuku as well as his new classmates. He was doing more than any other teacher Izuku had ever had. He'd even kept good on his promise. Since that day they'd talked, Izuku hadn't been paired with or fought against Kachan once in training. Not to mention, the man had apologized to him, which was still beyond odd to Izuku, but it was also very kind. Aizawa-sensei really does seem like a genuine guy, but that doesn't change the fact that they'd gotten off on the wrong foot, and Izuku was a little scarred from that interaction. Maybe his homeroom teacher really is a softie under all that stern exhaustion, but it's not really something that Izuku can just believe. He hopes the ghost is right, that his new teacher will prove in some way that he's on his side. Wouldn't that be a nice change of pace? And he really had no reason to not trust Oboro. But it was still hard. The longer Izuku seems to be putting off broaching the topic of telling his, frankly kinda scary homeroom sensei of his newly acquired quirk, the more antsy Oboro seems to get. It had only really been a little over 1 week of school since he'd even met these people, so Izuku really hadn't been putting it off that long. Right? The ghost hadn't really brought it up for the most part. He'd let Izuku settle into his new classes and get to know his peers and new teachers. Izuku supposes he should be thankful that the ghost had given him this much leeway, so he could settle into the school year when the ghost is obviously intently waiting for Izuku to make good on his not-quite promise. Izuku found he actually liked having Oboro around. He was a positive addition to his life, bright and cheerful, yet sarcastic and sometimes infuriating. He was just like every other teenager Izuku had met and known, but there was also something older and wiser about him sometimes, too. Izuku had honestly never met anyone like Oboro, dead or alive. The ghost just had such a distinct personality, joking, playful, and teasing. Yet he was also heartwarmingly kind and sensitive, too. There weren't a lot of people in the world you could completely be yourself around, much less someone like Izuku who'd always had to be mindful To have such an unbiased person in his life, someone who'd chosen the same path of life and knew exactly what Izuku was up against, was refreshing. All that said, the ghost was also audacious. The ghost wasn't one to be quieted unless it was on his terms, and he wasn't quiet about his own opinions in the slightest. If he had something to say, you were going to hear about it. He'd never so much as tried to censor himself when it came to talking about Kachan or All Might, who Izuku respected greatly. The ghost kindly disagreed most of the time. Izuku can't help but think it's a bit of a glimpse of the person Oboro had been before he'd passed away. And still, for the first time in his life, since he'd gotten his quirkless diagnosis, it feels like he has an actual, legit friend. A friend who he even sometimes forgets is a ghost by how real Oboro often feels. They just clicked. And Izuku isn't really sure if it's because they were destined to meet each other, destined to be friends, dead or alive, or whether they both just needed something, someone, out of this unlikely friendship. Neither were really in the position to be passing up a chance of making a friend, but Izuku likes to believe it's definitely the former. He can acknowledge there's some truth in the latter too, though. Still, it's nice to see Oboro's true personality starting to shine through the more comfortable with Izuku he gets. He's a great guy, but damn can he be annoying. Like now, midway through his second week of school. For the most part, Oboro had kept to himself, quiet while classes were in session. He was around still, in homeroom, English, and heroics training, but he didn't speak much. It had been a little odd for Izuku, who'd come to know Oboro for his sarcastic quips and endless teasing, but his presence had been a more or less seen, not heard sort of thing during classes. Izuku didn't mind his friend not chattering away the entire time like he had been on the first and second days of school. Actually, he really appreciated the ghost not distracting him, especially in English, where he'll be lost the second he loses his train of thought. Izuku had gotten used to having a mostly silent companion by his side. Unfortunately, that seems to have worn off. He'd been getting a bit more annoying each day from the second school had started that Monday morning of their second week. And it had been little things at first, Oboro watching over his shoulder as he worked, adding his own input that Izuku would have preferred he'd take the time to figure out himself. He'd started trying to help more with Izuku's classwork and stuff, and when he'd noticed it, he hadn't really mentioned it. It was little things, easily ignored or deterred by a stern stare from Izuku. But there's something different about it today. That answer is wrong. The ghost is leaning over Izuku's shoulder, arms crossed over the back of the chair as he leans on it. Izuku feels the icy chill behind him, and he knows, if the ghost could, he would have hooked his chin over Izuku's shoulder just to get that much more closer. Izuku's glad he's gotten used to having a ghost in such close proximity, so he really only has a reaction to the intensity of Oboro's chill when the ghost purposefully phases through him, or when they accidentally manage to brush through one another. Izuku's fingers tighten around his pencil in annoyance, afraid for just a second that he'll accidentally activate One for All and shatter the wood in his grasp. "Don't help me," Izuku grits out between his teeth, making sure to keep his gaze locked on his paper as he studies the answer he'd gotten. He finds his mistake after just a second, nose wrinkling as he flips his pencil to furiously erase his mistake. Izuku glares down at his paper as he finally answers the question, hopefully correct this time. "But you're doing it wrong," the ghost insists, without a care that he was literally feeding Izuku answers to a pop quiz. Oboro's head lolls down to catch Izuku's sideways glare, offering a guilty grin. "Like you did in question 3. That's not the right there, Izuku." Izuku's gaze drops to the third question, frowning at the "pick the one that makes sense in this particular question. There, and there question." Izuku finds his mistake there, too. fixing that but not without shooting a dark look over his shoulder. "This is cheating," Izuku mutters, now second-guessing all of his answers. "Stop trying to help me." "It's only cheating if you get caught." Oboro shrugs, leaning even closer over Izuku's shoulder, a hand even snaking up over Izuku's shoulder to point down onto paper. "Also, the punctuation in the sixth question is wrong too, by the way. Simple mistake." "Knock it off," Izuku snarls under his breath, shoving down the urge to throw a hand back through Oboro's face in an attempt to shoo him away. He honestly would have done just that too if he wasn't aware of how uncomfortable phasing through someone made Oboro feel, especially when he wasn't prepared for it. As annoyed as Izuku is, he doesn't want to harm the ghost. "Seriously, I can do it on my own. Really, I insist I do this alone. Thanks for the help, but no thanks." "Well, yeah," the ghost says matter-of-factly. "You could, but you've got to accept help in your life somewhere, you know. If you're not going to let Shota help you with your new super quirk, I'll at least help you keep your English grades up, whether you want that or not." "I don't need help," Izuku snaps softly, attention flicking up to first present Mike at the front of the room, who's still focused on whatever he's writing in front of him, before looking subtly to the side where all his classmates are focused on their own quizzes. They've been given all of class to finish the quiz, and Present Mike was trusting enough in them that he's only occasionally looking up to check for raised hands looking for help. Izuku can't help but feel like he's betraying his teacher's trust, stomach churning at the thought. "This is a quiz. Please stop." "Whether you want it or not," the ghost shakes his head, voice firm and final. "I'm sorry, Izu, but I can't just sit back and watch you work yourself into the ground, trying to do everything alone. You're not alone, you know. Not anymore. And if you won't accept help for yourself, I'll give it to you, even if it's not from where you really need it. I wish I could do more, but this is about it for me." "So, you're blackmailing me?" Izuku narrows his eyes, attention cocking back to look at the ghost. "That's real heroic." "Well, I wouldn't exactly call it that." Oboro grins sheepishly. "Threatening, then?" "That's a bit closer." The ghost concedes. He's got a smile on his face, but it falls when he looks over at Izuku's sharp glare. Oboro hesitates, looking away with a sigh. "I know you don't want this. I get it. You don't trust teachers. But you're going to run yourself into the ground if you keep shouldering everything alone. I went to school here too. I know the workload. I know what you're up against, what you will be up against the longer you attend school here. It's tough, Izuku, not just classes, but training too. You can't do this alone, Izu. I'm just trying to help." "I don't need help with English," the boy mutters, just loud enough for the ghost to hear him as he lets his head drop down onto his desk. Izuku shifts faintly until his forehead is resting on the edge of his desktop, gaze drop down to his lap. He feels movement beside him, the cold movement of a ghost, and then he sees Oboro's body sinking to the floor, shoulder leaning against the leg of Izuku's desk. He turns his head slightly, catching the ghost's gaze. "That's debatable," Oboro retorts, not unkindly. Izuku opens his mouth to argue, but considering how he's clearly struggling with this quiz, the ghost's assessment isn't too far off. Still, Izuku's mouth presses into a straight line. "The point's to learn, not to know it all already." Oboro's mouth opens like he wants to argue now, but instead, his mouth falls shut as he slumps sideways against the desk leg. I know," the ghost mumbles, looking away defeated. I don't want to see you struggle because you won't accept any help. I know there are people who will want to help, if they know, but you're still... And I can't really... Ugh. You're learning your quirk, I know you are, but you're in Class 1A, man. You've got to be the best of the best to keep up, and I know you can do it. That's not the question here. You've got the power and drive to be a good hero, but you can't do it all alone. Heroics was never meant to be a single-person operation, you know. It sucks that I can't help you in any other way." The defeat he's feeling seems to overwhelm the ghost for a long second. He draws his legs up to his chest, gaze drifting sideways to Izuku's peers. It's like the ghost is searching for what to say, how to continue. Izuku wants to comfort him, but it's really not the time or place to do so, considering his whole class is spread around the room working on their own quizzes. Mike-sensei is still up front, and Izuku only has a limited amount of time to complete the quiz. But Izuku's eyes flick back to the ghost, green meeting blue. "But I know Shota can help you. He's been hard on you, sure, but that's because he's under the impression you've had your quirk for the last decade like everyone else. But you haven't, and he doesn't know that. I know he hasn't been a star teacher so far, but you haven't provided him with everything he needs to know to be able to teach you right, you know?" Izuku chews at his bottom lip as he studies the ghost. Oboro actually looks worried about this, about Izuku. He hadn't expected anyone else to know about the quirk, least of all someone who'd badger him into seeking help. Truthfully, Izuku had never considered this from another perspective. He'd started this school year knowing he could rely on All Might. That was it. So having someone so intent on him talking to another teacher, it makes his chest feel tight. Izuku worries his bottom lip as he thinks, only letting his lip go when he tastes a metallic burst on his tongue. "You're already at a disadvantage here," Oboro continues after a second, voice quiet. "You're making it harder on yourself when you don't have to. I've seen students burn out in programs like this. I've seen them run themselves right into the ground. I watched one of my best friends." Oboro swallows, eyes fluttering shut reminiscently for a moment before his attention is back on Izuku, expression hard. "I won't let it happen to another friend. You'll make a great hero, Izuku. You've got to let people help you do that. It doesn't have to be you against the world, you know?" Izuku isn't sure what to say now. He hadn't expected Oboro to have such valid worries, to actually have a reason to why he was being such an obnoxious little shit. He feels guilty. The churn of annoyance in his stomach from earlier swiftly melts into something more bitter, like a brick weighing heavily in his stomach. And even though he wants to, feels like he needs to say something to the ghost, he doesn't get a chance as a hand settles softly on his shoulder blade, startling Izuku up. His back goes ramrod straight as wild eyes flick sideways, where he finds present Mike crouched beside him on the other side of the desk to where Oboro's still sitting. "You doing all right, little listener?" The teacher's voice is smooth, quiet, as to not disturb the other quiz-takers around him. "You've had your head down for a bit. Are you finished? Or maybe, is there anything I could help you with? There's no shame in asking for a hand here and there. You dig?" Izuku glances down at the ghost, against his better judgment, seeing the genuine pleading look on the ghost's face. He wants Izuku to accept the help being offered on a silver platter. Present Mike had taken the first step. All Izuku needs to do is admit he needs it. Izuku's nose scrunches up faintly, and when he catches Oboro's gaze again, the ghost's face crumples up in panic. And it's only then that Izuku realizes his emotions have gotten the better of him again, and that his eyes have filled with unshed tears. He's always been such a crybaby. Izuku offers the ghost a tiny, crooked smile, before turning his attention back to his teacher. Izuku clears his throat, subtly reaching a hand up to wipe away the tears. I guess I'm kind of stuck. I don't think I'm doing it right. English has always been hard for me. I'm a bit frustrated, Sensei. I'm struggling." Izuku's eyes are locked on his paper, only raising when the man's hand pats the top of his head gently. "That's all right." Present Mike smiles softly as he flattens his palms on the edge of Izuku's desk and rises from his crouch a bit to scan Izuku's quiz answers calculatingly. He looks back at Izuku after a second, offering a toothy grin. "We all get a little frustrated sometimes, yeah? I'll help you understand what you're struggling with, and then you can take another shot at it. Sound good?" "Sounds good." Izuku ducks his head in a thankful nod that doubles as a chance to catch the ghost's gaze under the desk. His smile is small, but it's honest. There's something prideful in the expression as well, which, in turn, makes Izuku's lips curl up into a tiny smile too. He knows it's not exactly what Oboro had in mind, but it is a step in the right direction. Izuku is trusting a teacher with something to do with classes. Maybe it's not Aizawa-sensei, or to do with his quirk, but it's more than Izuku was willing to do just that morning. He could have brushed his teacher off or claimed he was fine, and he knows Present Mike would have nodded, stood, and left him be to finish the quiz alone. But he hadn't. Baby steps. Good. Present Mike grins widely, completely oblivious to the interaction between Izuku and his ghostly friend. "Let's see here. Oh, yeah, I see what you're doing wrong with these, listener. You're totally on the right track, though. Let's just..." Present Mike explains the questions in a way that makes Izuku understand, without the answers being fed to him. Izuku hadn't realized it could be this easy to have someone talk him through it, so he's not confused and overwhelmed. And if Izuku's foot freezes as the ghost's hand phases through his shoe in a knowing gesture, he can't find it in himself to care. Attention on his paper, focus on his sensei, and a small smile settling onto his lips at the gesture from the ghost. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 4 of Yuuei Survival Guide. The second half to this chapter will be up next. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to everything so far in the comments below. Just a reminder, of course, that the fic is located over on AO3. You can always slide over leaving comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it's much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.